Retirement villages. Two words that in our society carry with them some less than desirable connotations. They're seen as places that you are put, without your input, to live out your days. Shane Jacobson is out to prove that the R word is just that, a word, challenging the misconceptions that we have about retirement village living. This is episode 3 of the R word, made in conjunction with Stockland Retirement Living.
If you're thinking about what to do with the next 30 odd years of your life, it's going to be a pretty daunting prospect. Most people want to do a bit of travel, spend time with friends and family. All of us worry about money and whether we're spending it in the right way, making the right decisions. It's crystal ball gazing kind of stuff. Over the last couple of episodes, we've spoken with Carmel Salo. Now, she's at a bit of a loss about what to do when she and her husband finally decide to slow down. Felicity, their youngest daughter, says that her dad's 74 and still gets up on the roof for a spot of maintenance when it's required. He does it, she says, but he probably shouldn't. And that's the thing. These days, with 70 being the new 60, when is the right time to sit down and seriously start planning?
Obviously, as you get older, health conditions can creep in, and being active as long as possible is going to lead to a better retirement and future life. So being able to have access to facilities and healthcare and things that you can get to quite easily is really important and something that we do talk about, but I don't think there's too much action there. There's a lot of discussion and a lot of deliberation and less kind of progression.
That's Felicity, and she says there's been a bit of talk about where her mum and dad might like to move and how to stay close to the family, but not much past that. Now, for most people, there's 3 basic options. Stay in your family home, downsize, or build a granny flat. But what few people realise is that retirement village living is another form of downsizing. Richard McCulloch, an independent lawyer who specialises in retirement options, also says most people don't realise that staying at home or building a granny flat can actually end up being more financially and legally complicated than moving into a village.
What's been happening in recent times, because of the increasing longevity of the population, which really wasn't anticipated even 20, 30 years ago, combine that with the increasing level of frailty we see, and certainly with the increasing incidence of dementia, it is becoming harder for people to stay at home for longer.
Richard says people should think about whether they might need a high level of care or at-home care or changes to the home to make it livable, in which case you might need to take out a reverse mortgage to cover the costs.
Because if you compare a reverse mortgage to a departure fee in the village, they may well end up being a finely balanced matter, not a great deal of difference. Another common area or strategy is what's called a granny flat. That is very complicated, and there are a number of primary issues you have to address to see how to make it work.
We all know people who have lost their house or split up with their partners, and that's when the trouble can start if parents are living in a granny flat on a child's property. What Richard tells us is that there is a growing number of cases in the New South Wales Supreme Court, specifically around granny flats.
They're 2 common alternatives to retirement village that don't make retirement villages look quite so scary after all. As long as you do your homework and everyone knows where they stand, go with their eyes open, villages are a good option in my view.
So let's assume you're starting to think about retirement village living. Is it as complicated a prospect as everyone assumes? According to Richard, it's not.
Well, the most basic thing to do, which is not legal advice at all, is obvious. Drive around, go to a lot of places, get the feel for it, because very often it's the vibe. It's the fact that you like the view you have, or the facilities in the village. You may have some friends that have moved there already, all those sort of factors. That really is the most important thing. And then look at the price to move in, the cost to stay there, and finally the deductions when you leave. So once you've moved in, you have to pay a monthly charge called a recurrent charge, very like a strata levy. And so it really collectivises a whole lot of costs you would have if you were staying at home. So, for example, rates, building insurance, maintenance, landscaping, gardening. That monthly fee is usually very competitive or cheaper than what you pay staying at home because of that aspect. Security is another good example. It's obviously very hard to have a security patrol at home, but villages typically do have that facility.
Richard says 15 or more years ago, some operators were a bit dodgy. They were advertising certain things they didn't actually provide or increasing the monthly charges by more than they'd promised in the contract. One case actually made it all the way to the High Court, and in response to that, New South Wales changed its laws about retirement villages.
The one we've had for the past 16 years is a very comprehensive code about how villages work. The operator has to be much more clear and upfront in their disclosure. The law now is in New South Wales and in some other states that an operator cannot make a profit out of recurrent charges. The ability for a resident to get ripped off in terms of recurrent charges has been virtually wiped out in New South Wales.
Now, the laws for retirement villages are different in every state, but basically the industry is held to stringent standards of behaviour, which means a lot of the horror stories are either outdated or really exaggerated. In fact, if you've been listening in for the past couple of episodes, you would have heard our experts Barbara Scales and Yvonne Wells talking about how well people actually fare in retirement village living. This is what Yvonne has to say on the issue.
I was analysing some data just last night, looking at predictors of mortality in people living in a range of housing settings, including retirement villages, their own homes, and residential care, actually. And what I found, much to my surprise really, is that one of the strongest predictors of whether someone will be alive 2 years later than at baseline is how satisfied they are with their housing. So people who were very satisfied with their housing were twice as likely to still be alive 2 years later, even taking into account their health, gender and age.
Yvonne is a registered psychologist, and she's very clear about the benefits that living in a communal situation can have. Now, yes, people might laugh at the idea of group activities, but there's proof that getting out and getting involved will help your well-being and longevity. And if getting out and involved means stepping out your front door, it's a lot more likely to happen.
There's quite a lot of evidence around about how you can promote emotional well-being in older people. A couple of years ago, we completed a large literature review for Beyond Blue on just that topic, and there were a few things that consistently come out as being very effective for helping older people maintain emotional well-being. One of these is exercise. So there's nothing like physical exercise for helping people to remain emotionally stable and to avoid anxiety and depression. Another one is music. So musical activities are extremely important in helping people to stay well and also in terms of maintaining social interactions with other people. There's nothing more fun than singing in a choir, if that's what you like to do.
Aileen Stewart is a regional operations manager for Stockland, and she spent a huge amount of time with residents across all the villages in her area. She sees the kind of evidence Yvonne talks about all the time.
The absolute joy on people's faces when they are undertaking these activities is fantastic and so rewarding to see. That high that a resident can get from participating in that can last several hours afterwards, and the laughter that comes from our community centres when there is one of those activities on is fantastic. So I see firsthand the real benefits of our residents engaging in those activities.
Next week, we'll follow Carmel as she takes a look around one of the newest and biggest villages in Sydney, MacArthur Gardens, and see how she shapes up against some of the residents for a spot of mahjong. Until then, I'm Shane Jacobson, and this has been The R Word.
Thinking about retirement? With 65 retirement villages around Australia, Stockland knows retirees are looking for living options as unique and varied as they are. Which is why Stockland created Retire magazine, your guide to retirement village living. Learn what Retire Your Way really means. Get tips for choosing a home for now and the future, and understand the costs involved. Call 1800 72 71 70 to order your free copy or visit retire.com.au. Stockland Retirement Living. It's your place.